First essay that we start with every year is the college essay because it's probably a big source of stress and it's something that has been looming over your head probably for 2 years now. Maybe you've started over the summer, maybe your parents have been asking you to start, but if you haven't, now is a good time to start. In terms of writing mode, since this is AP Literature and Composition, we're looking at elaboration by example and possibly narrative writing, depending on your prompt and depending on your take on the prompt. A lot of students ask why we have to write the college essay, or if it's optional, they ask, should I write the college essay? And I do recommend that you write the college essay, even if it's optional. It basically makes you into a 3D person instead of a black and white paper. Because right now you're just a list of statistics. You're a GPA, your test scores, you're a list of accomplishments. The essay allows your personality to shine through. It shows you as an individual. It is also a great opportunity to display the fact that you can write really well and that you have critical thinking skills and you can make connections, you can reflect, you have learned from your experiences. And this is a place to show parts of you that haven't been seen on other parts of your application. In past years, Dr. Otten, who has worked at the college level reading application essays and other parts of the application process, has come to our school to do visits and give students advice. I did put one of his videos that we recorded from his visit 2 years ago up on my website. If you go to Vision, click on AP Literature, and it's on that front page. You can find his video. You can fast forward through it. I think they recorded his visit to the entire class. But a lot of this advice comes from Dr. Otten. So he has been a college essay reader, so he knows what they're looking for. And the first thing is adequate self-expression skills. Do you have control of language? Can you use transitions? Logical expression? Do you have a sense of how the method of writing affects your reader? Do you have your reader in mind? Do you have an adult vocabulary? Not that you've thrown in big words or used the thesaurus feature in Microsoft Word, but that you genuinely have some upper level vocabulary that it's clear is always used in your writing. Evidence of thought. It might sound a bit strange, but they are looking for well-rounded human beings. They don't want people who are just able to regurgitate things. They want to see that you can reflect on yourself and evaluate yourself. They know that no one's perfect. You probably don't have a perfect record from high school. There's probably classes that you wish you had done better in. There's probably activities you wish you had continued. No one's perfect. And what they're looking at is, can you reflect on your imperfections and think about how you've improved and learn from those and how you will continue to improve in the future. They're looking for an awareness of audience. So many essays are so generic, they could literally apply to probably 50% of the high school population and most colleges. You want to make sure that your reader knows that this essay is tailored to them. Look at the school's catalog, their webpage. If you know any alumni, if you have family that went to the school, if there's a certain tradition that the school carries out, you should mention that in your essay if you're able to. I know sometimes on the Common app you have to submit one essay that gets submitted to several schools, so obviously don't do that. But if it's an essay that's tailored to a certain school or that you can send individually to the schools, definitely mention things about that particular school. Maybe there's a program you want to get into. Maybe there's a professor who you've read a lot about, who's done some research that you're interested in possibly joining. I imagine many of you are applying to a very competitive situation, a school where maybe it's not a guarantee. In that case, Dr. Otten suggests something memorable, a sign of potential, something that sets you apart from other candidates. When I was going house hunting, there was this one house, and one of the bedrooms had literally wall-to-wall shelves full of Transformers, you know, like the toys, the TV show from the 1980s. And so we ended up referring to it as the Transformer house. Now, we didn't end up buying the house, and it was not related to the Transformers, but of all the houses we looked at, it's the only one I still remember because there was something memorable about it. And that's kind of what you want to do for your college essay. You want to think of something memorable. You probably have found sample essay prompts. If you've not yet looked, there's no better time to start than tonight when you get home from school. So go to the college or colleges that you plan to apply to. You might have to look under a link called prospective students, and that means students who are looking at possibly attending there next year. You may have to actually start the application process in order to see their essay prompts, and that's fine. You can start the application process. You don't have to pay any money, any application fees to start the process, and you don't even have to commit to finishing the process. But if you do need to start the process to see the essays, I recommend that you do that sooner rather than later. But you can see some of these sample prompts. They're all very similar. They want to know about something significant that's had an influence on you. Could be a person, an issue of national importance, maybe a recent story in the news, something that has challenged your ideas, an ethical dilemma, even a time you failed. All of the essays have in common the fact that they're looking for growth on your part. What has caused you to grow? And they're going to use that to speculate on how you might add to the college environment and how you might grow and continue to grow as you attend. Here's my biggest tip. If you're bored writing it, the readers will be bored reading it. I can't tell you how many times I've been bored reading some of the college essays that I read. And I am honest and I tell the students, this is not interesting. Look around the room. When you read your essay, can 50% or more of the students in the room have written just about the same essay? If so, it's probably boring, it's probably not original. When you go to reread it, if you're bored and you just want to get through it, how do you think your reader is going to feel? You want this essay to be so amazing and exciting that you want to run up to every single friend you have and have them read it, and every teacher that you have and have them read it, because it's that awesome and you just can't wait to share it. You want to exude that kind of energy. Easier said than done, I know, but you need to think about what makes you unique. I really do think that that's the hardest part of this essay. It's about you, and sometimes it's hard to think about yourself. It's hard to think objectively about you. And a lot of students feel like they're bragging. They feel like they need to be modest and not really say a lot about themselves. Don't feel that way. Don't brag just to brag, but you do want to showcase who you are, and you want to do that in an engaging way. Next big tip, make the essay positive. Don't dwell on the negative. And I say this every year. And every year, any essay that starts out with something negative, which is totally fine, they turn it in, they say, I didn't dwell on the negative, I stayed positive. It starts out being about 2/3 of the way negative, and then the final paragraph is how it became positive in the end. You want to switch that proportion. Maybe the first quarter of the essay should explain the negative situation. The whole rest of the essay should focus on how you turned it around to become positive. I'll use a fictional example, but that's based on years and years of examples that I've read. So let's say you're writing an essay about how you totaled your parents' car and you had to work to make the money to pay off the insurance costs that were involved in replacing the car. A lot of students start out writing about the horrific car wreck and then the months and months of agony and the backache from the crash and the neck ache and the visits to the doctors and things like that. And they'll go on for paragraphs and paragraphs. And it's actually good writing. There's metaphors, there's similes. I start to feel uncomfortable reading about all these horrific details of the crash. But then I'm waiting for the positive, and it's only in the last paragraph where they kind of briefly mention, almost like their arm is being twisted to mention it, that they learned something about perseverance and hard work and maybe being a little more careful driving. And what we end up doing is working. It usually takes several drafts, but we basically condense the first 2/3 of the essay into a short paragraph in the beginning, establishing the fact that, okay, there was a car wreck. Yes, I caused it. And then most of the rest of the essay is about how they turned that around into something positive. So really try to focus on positive. What did you learn from this? And how has it possibly been applied to other elements of your life since that's happened? Be sure that even when you're doing this, you establish something that's going to stand out to the reader, a trait of yours, a quality, a talent, a goal, a passion, something that, again, look around the room, not everyone could write about. Think about branding yourself. Coca-Cola, open happiness, right? Nike, just do it. The brand that Coca-Cola wants to establish is, if you're drinking Coca-Cola, you're smiling, you're dancing, there's like bubbles everywhere and flowers and things like that. If you're wearing Nike, just do it. You're full of adrenaline. You're going to accomplish things. You're going to be a star. What is your brand? If you had to make a commercial for yourself, what would your very short, memorable slogan be? That's what you want to do in your essay. You want to brand yourself. A couple more tips for your essays. You want to start with a catchy opening. You don't want to summarize. It's not a 5-paragraph essay. You don't want to have a long, wound-up intro. In the grand scheme of life, we all experience many hardships. No. I'm going to use a very bad essay that I wrote when I was in high school. I don't have the actual essay itself, unfortunately, but I sort of remember what I wrote. Here was my not-so-effective opening. Every day after school, I practiced running for over 2 hours. Okay, when I wrote that, I thought that was impressive. I mean, running for 2 hours every single day, if you multiply 2 by 5 by however many weeks I ran in the year, that's a lot of hours. They should be impressed. But now that I'm a little more grown up, I realize they probably said, no, another sports essay, no. Anyone who practiced anything could have started out with that. That doesn't mean I'm any good. That doesn't mean I learned anything. It just means I went to practice. Not effective. Thinking about my unique situation, here's how I could have started, and this is true. I once sprinted into my paper-laden chemistry teacher, scattering graded papers across the hallway like confetti. He stopped, then used American Sign Language to tell me I'd earned an A on my most recent test, before we both stooped over to pick up the papers. This is true. If the college essay readers are reading this as my first paragraph, they're going to say, what? I'm intrigued. Why is this person sprinting through their hallways? Why did the chemistry teacher use American Sign Language to explain the grade on the test? These are situations that made me unique and that I could definitely talk about. In high school, we did not have, I grew up in Connecticut, so it was very, very cold. So indoor track season, we had to practice inside, but there was no field house or track or anything like that. We had to run on the 3rd floor of our high school, which was kind of square-shaped, but with all kinds of weird corners and things like that. So we had to prop open doors, and we often ran into walls and closed doors by accident, and students and teachers and things like that. They sort of knew to avoid the 3rd floor after school, but it wasn't always possible. I could definitely use that to talk about my specific situation. Where I grew up in Connecticut, it was a very wealthy county, but my city was the poorest city, or one of the poorest cities in the county. So all the other districts that we competed against, they had field houses and all kinds of, uniforms that matched and everything. And we were sort of this ragtag team, but we managed to use that as kind of motivation. That would be a unique essay that not everyone could write about. Remember also that style counts. In addition to proving something about your personality, your brand, who you are, the essay proves how well you can write. So think about fictional writing techniques. Word choice matters, figurative language, imagery, symbolism. A lot of times if you repeat an image, maybe an opening image followed by the same image used in a slightly different way for closing. Think about transitions. Make sure that there's a logical flow, that you've thought about your reader and the way that the order of your sentences is going to affect the reader. Make sure it's organized, and make sure there's plenty of examples. You don't want to just make statements without examples. You don't want to say, I'm a very smart person. I should attend your school. Give me examples. Show me how you're smart. Show me things you've done that are smart. You do want a conclusion, and a lot of times the readers will just read your essay and kind of read it holistically. So the conclusion is probably going to stick in their mind the most. In your conclusion, emphasize your main point. Show some higher insight, but don't just restate. So think about what's the larger lesson that we need to learn. You may have found that you're in a sticky situation in terms of word count. Some of you probably have a 250-word essay to write. Some of you might be lucky and have 600 or 650 words. But even that's not that long. Every word counts. Don't waste anything. Look for excessive use of to-be verbs. Think about using stronger verbs instead. Avoid cliches. Remove fluff. You all know what fluff is. When your teacher says, write a 3-page essay, and you manage to come up with a 1.5 pages, and then you just kind of fluff the rest of it so that you add words. Professors can see through fluff. AP literature teachers can see through fluff. So from this point on in your lives, don't add fluff to your essays, especially in a college essay. Instead, just use transitions, jump from one point to the next. with a short but smooth transition, very sentence structure. I know it might sound weird to those listening in from maybe the hallway, but read your work aloud to yourself. Listen to the patterns. Are all the sentences the same length? Are there some short, punchy sentences in to break it up? There should be. Finally, I've said this before, but it's worth repeating. What makes your essay memorable and original? What does the essay say about you? Could someone else in the school have written it? Could many people in the school have written it? If it's that generic, it's not going to be memorable. And of course, anything that's off topic or irrelevant, don't add it in there. If you're writing about a drama-filled situation, and this is based on experience, please take out most of the details of the drama. We don't need to relive the drama. We just want to know how you've grown and changed as a result. What I recommend that you do is brainstorm before you write. So what's your topic? For me, if I had brainstormed in high school, which I don't think I did for the college essay, I would have said, okay, I want to write about running track. Then you want to say, okay, what does this show about me? I want to show my determination. And I think this would be important about me because I was determined not only in track, but in all elements of my life. So when I put my mind to something, I made sure I accomplished it. So somewhere in my essay, I would want to make sure that that point conveyed. If I'm just writing about track, I want the reader to know that, yes, this applies to running, but it also applies to other elements of my life, like academics. So I would use details like running in the halls because we didn't have a track, it was too snowy to run outside. We all had shin splints and knee injuries and all kinds of things from hallway running. At one point, my toenail, I ran into a closed door that I thought was open, taking a turn too fast, and my toenail eventually fell off. It was horrible. Being mocked by other teens, we were kind of looked down upon and made fun of by the wealthier districts because we didn't always have uniforms that matched. We had like older ones and then newer ones. And then I'd incorporate, probably in the conclusion, a quote that my dad always used to say. He said, "A poor workman always blames his tools." And he'd use that with me every time I tried to come up with an excuse for not doing well on something. And he would always say, if you're really good at something, you'll make it work no matter what your conditions are. And so I would kind of bridge that to my determination and the fact that I didn't grow up in a super wealthy district. We can't control our circumstances, but we can control what we do to achieve our goals within those circumstances. So I think you should do something like this, brainstorm, really think about branding yourself. If it was here's the Miss Egger essay, my brand would be determined, successful, something like that. Dr. Otten has some suggestions about organization. He's assuming it's about 500 words. 500 words should be more than one paragraph for sure. If it's 2 paragraphs, it should be a strong contrast, maybe the bad thing that happened and the good thing that happened as a result. If it's 3 or 4 paragraphs, maybe it's steps in a process, a progression of something, how you learned something about yourself. If it's 5 paragraphs, it's more of a formal 5-paragraph essay style, a formal discussion with an intro and conclusion. You don't need to default to this. It doesn't always make the most engaging essay. If it's a narrative, if you've chosen to tell a story, which is totally fine, use as many paragraphs as feel natural. If you're telling a story, you can use dialogue, you can use fictional techniques. Just make sure you have a purpose in mind that will come through at some point in the narrative. Which brings me to special devices. You can tell a story. You can use dialogue, you can describe a scene, you can use imagery. You can withhold the thesis to build suspense. It's okay to wait until the conclusion to reveal what you're talking about. You can use figurative language, and if it's appropriate, you can add humor. Just make sure it's all working to brand you as the person that you want to be branded as. Do use proportional paragraphs. A lot of times I'll see a paragraph that's like 3 lines long and then one that's half a page and then another 3-line paragraph. Make sure the paragraphs are about the same length. Make sure there's memorable sentences. Make sure your prose is beautiful. You want to read this out loud to all your friends because it's that amazing. Use natural constructions. Use active voice. Don't use passive voice. Passive voice is, the essay was written by me. No, I wrote the essay. To find out what sounds natural, just read it out loud. You can even record yourself reading it out loud and then listen back. You'll definitely hear what's awkward. Don't use expletives. Even if you're trying to be funny or cute, it usually doesn't work. Don't use slang unless you're using it within dialogue if you're telling a story. Don't fail to say something worthwhile. Don't hide your traits. Again, don't brag blatantly just by making statements, I'm super smart, I'm super awesome. But instead, showcase your traits. Don't simply list them. Now, this essay is not graded on the 9-point AP scale. When you write literary analysis, that's on the 9-point AP scale, and that's a kind of different grading scale than you're possibly used to for English class. This will be graded on a regular grading scale, and I'll be grading for 3 things. Style. Does the writing flow well? Does it reflect the abilities of someone who should be in college? Do you have a grown-up vocabulary? Do you have control of language and transitions? Content. Does the content reflect your personality? Does it answer the prompt? You can have amazing style and terrible content, or vice versa. You want both of them to be good. And then finally, mechanics. This is just grammar and spelling. You guys should be okay with mechanics by this point in your career, hopefully. Rough draft. Make sure you turn this in by the specified date. Late rough drafts cannot guarantee feedback will be given in time for your final draft. So make sure you get your rough drafts in on time. Your prompt probably gives you a word count. If it doesn't, I would suggest 600 to 800 words. If it's 250 words or less, I would suggest turning in 2 or 3 essays. You want to write enough that you can showcase your abilities, and I'll count those collectively as your essay grade. So for this essay only, now there's no rewrites in this class generally, but for this essay only, as long as your final draft is turned in on time, you can rewrite for full credit as many times as you want. But again, this is only if the essay is turned in on time the first time the final draft is due, and then there will be a cutoff date at the end of the quarter. So try not to stress out. I know this can be a stressful essay. Try to reflect on who you are. If you really are having trouble looking at yourself objectively, parents are not always the best sources to go to because they're not always objective. But if you talk to a teacher or a friend, maybe more of an acquaintance friend, and ask them to list some qualities that they see in you, that might trigger some ideas. The more people you talk to parents, friends, best friends, teachers, the more well-rounded an idea you'll get of yourself if you are having trouble being objective. But just kind of relax, think about who you are, reflect on where you've come in the last 17, 18 years, and try to write something you're really proud of.